For hundreds of thousands of years, humans thrived as nomadic, egalitarian hunter-gatherers. It was only around 10,000 years ago that a few societies around the world began to experiment with sedentism, agriculture, and the hoarding of resources. These societies spurred feedback loops of growth, inequality, and environmental devastation, conquering and colonizing and domesticating everyone and everything in their path, causing the sixth largest mass extinction in the history of life on Earth. Today, we live in a world that is a mismatch of our evolution in more ways than one. We feel disconnected, isolated, and powerless. Can we find our way back to a life that better matches how humans ought to live? What can we learn about how to live well from other cultures who've figured it out? Is there time to reverse our self destructive trajectory? How can we reclaim our wildness? These are the themes of the Rewilding Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Michael Bauer. This podcast is produced and made possible from supporters on Patreon. Thank you. If the Rewilding Podcast inspires you, gives you hope, or makes you think, please subscribe, share it on social media, and become a patron at patreon.com/Peter Michael Bauer. If you're new to rewilding or want to expand your perception of it, I recommend attending one of my Rewilding 101 workshops, which I offer both in person in Portland, Oregon, or online for those who live around the world via Zoom. You can check upcoming dates and register at rewildportland.com. If you've been looking for ways to engage with anthropology that are fun and easy to grasp, this is the podcast episode for you. Rewilding requires learning from humanity's diverse past in order to shape our present and future in a way that is reciprocal with the land and each other. Anthropology can feel daunting and inaccessible to many, from academic jargon to studies behind paywalls and the occasional pretentious practitioner. Social media provides a potential space for culturally savvy anthropologists to share uncommonly known positions and views in a fun and engaging way with people who are not versed in academia. On this episode of the podcast, I'm speaking with Andie, the creator of Ancestral Habits account on Instagram. Andie lays concepts out in a way that are easy to understand and interpret and includes the proper citations for legitimacy, something we need more of these days, especially on social media. Andie has a degree in anthropology and has worked in biomedical research development in academia for over a decade. Andie, welcome to the Rewilding Podcast.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, how did you get into anthropology to begin with?
So I majored in it in college, but I have always been incredibly curious about prehistory. I think the story that I tell, which is true, is that when I was like 14 or however old you are when you take that first biology class,
Mm.
and it talks about human origins, and it gives you like 6 million years ago, like we speciated from the last common ancestor, and then like 2 million years ago, we were walking on two legs. And then it says like 250,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a long time ago. Like, what do you mean anatomically modern? Like they looked like me, they had same cognitive capacity as I did. That's so interesting. And then the next thing you know, it's like, okay, and then you're farming, and then civilization,
Right.
and then like you have an iPad.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a second, what about that 250,000 years? Like, what were they doing? Who are these
Mm-hmm.
people? And so I was like hooked at a really young age.
Mm.
And so it's been like a 25-year journey of trying to understand who are these people? They're related to us. They're
Yeah.
they're like my relatives. They're your relatives. They're our common ancestors, and we just don't know enough about them. And
Mm-hmm.
they lived fully human lives. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's crazy to think like there's the whole like we built rocket like the rocket scientist or whatever. I remember there was like at some point I think Daniel Quinn or somebody was like, we've had the brain of rocket scientists for like 250,000 years. So like what were they doing? If
Oh my
not
God.
building rocket ships, what were we doing? And that
Oh,
was similar for me as well.
that what you just said is, I think, so important to wrap our heads
Hmm.
around, because that applies to things like language. Like
Hmm.
scientists believe that we have had the genetic or the cognitive capacity for language for a very long time,
Hmm.
but we didn't develop it on a complex scale until maybe around 100,000 years ago. I think the current estimate is between 100 and 130,000 years ago is when complex language really developed. So why didn't we need it? We could have
Right.
used
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
what was it about our groups and the way we interacted with each other that had us not really leaning into the complexity of language? How else were we communicating? And I mean, how much of that have we lost? How
Mm-hmm.
much of it is still in us and we could
Yeah.
tap into more?
Mm-hmm. Or, even thinking along those lines, it's like if you look at something like writing as a kind of technology that's been developed and then abandoned like many different times. There's like civilizations who started writing for whatever the material conditions that created that and then
Yep.
stopped. Like maybe there were language pockets that sprouted up in more particular ways and then just were like, nah, we don't actually really need this anymore, or who knows.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
all possibilities are on the
Yeah.
table, which is
Yeah.
so cool. I always say that, like, when you're
Mhm.
learning about prehistory, if you don't walk away from a question with more questions than answers, then you're doing
Mm-hmm.
it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So a big component of rewilding, and I feel like your work too, is the idea of an evolutionary mismatch.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you could kind of, I mean, I assume a lot of the audience probably is familiar with that term, but I'd like to hear you explain what it is and why it's an important aspect of your work.
Okay. Peter, you asked me this ahead of time, and so I went like all in and
Oh,
I'm
nice. Oh,
prepared.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, like, in just overall, a quick introduction to it. Evolutionary mismatch is a trait that was useful at some point. It adapted for a specific purpose, and the environment has changed, and that purpose no longer stands, and so it's not useful and often harmful in a modern or a different environment. But I don't feel like that really gives the full picture because their mismatches are vast and more research is coming out about them. I think they were historically maybe looked at more in like a disease context, but it
Hmm.
spans a much larger gamut than that. So to kind of paint a picture here, so we evolved in a specific environment. We were outside, it was in nature. We were outside 24/7. Even in caves, that still is outside to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, we were facing the elements. There was a certain degree of danger. The danger came from things we were aware of. It came from weather, came from predators, it came from possibly other humans, although the evidence for that doesn't really kind of take off until later in our
Mhm.
evolutionary history. Um, we were socially connected to other humans. That's another big part of the evolved environment. And we lived like this for the vast majority of our evolutionary past. And we survived like this because we are adapted to the environment, meaning our bodies, our biological behaviors were aligned with surroundings, giving us the best chances to stay alive. And it's a slow genetic adaptation. And it worked. It clearly worked because we thrived. I mean, our species, look at us. Like we did it. um, so in this environment, we evolved certain traits, including these are just random, a taste for sugar. Not all animals have the genes that allow their taste receptors to
Hmm.
taste sugars, like
Hmm.
carnivores don't. We evolved a hyper awareness of our environment. We evolved a physiological need to be near other people for safety. And yes, that is reflected in our biology.
Mhm.
We evolved the ability to make snap decisions and think and act
Hmm.
quickly. We evolved neurodiversity, and it stuck around because it benefited groups where we could holistically interact with our environment. We evolved really strong immune systems because they were constantly challenged. And then, like a classic medical anthro textbook example is sickle cell anemia, where if you have sickle cell, if you have a gene for it, your cells take on a like a C shape of a sickle if you're infected with malaria, and that increases your odds of survival.
Hmm.
So all of those traits were like fine tuned to specific environments. And then the evolved environment kind of like went away after the agricultural revolution, which was only 10,000 years ago, and population sizes grew. So it happened so quickly, and it essentially ripped our bodies out of an environment that we were really well adapted to, really adjusted to, and landed us in a new one. And now these traits are harmful, or at best useless, at worst harmful. And so to go back through that list, having a taste for sugar, that's great until it's everywhere. And then it starts harming your body. Being aware of your surroundings and like having that hypervigilance or awareness of things is really important to be aware of predators. But today, the things that we were adapted to understanding about our environment, like the way our ears work and the sounds we hear, the way we interpret light during specific times of the day, the way our bodies touching the ground, the way we sense vibrations, that all adapted to be aware of like who's around the corner, where is our food, and keeping us safe. But today, everything triggers us. If you live in the industrialized West, we've got lights on all the time. Our bodies are like, where's the threat? We are hearing sounds constantly, airplanes flying overhead. Even if your conscious brain isn't feeling it, your heart rate is reacting to it. And that has been studied. So we are constantly under stress. And now many people have chronic anxiety because your body is like, there are lions everywhere, but there aren't. So that's like another perfect example of a mismatch. Neurodiversity. So this was incredibly important to ensuring well-rounded groups that could attack obstacles from a variety of perspectives. Like you need someone thinking, how do I distill the poison from the leaf for the spear? And then you need someone thinking like big picture, like spears are outdated. What about an atlatl? What about like a bow and arrow? And then you need someone who's like, I'm not worried about hunting. What's the vibe? How's everybody feeling? I want to be in tune with their emotions. And you need someone who's maybe not a good communicator, but they're so in tune with their environment that they can tell you when the weather's going to change. And like, I'm being a little bit cheeky here because I'm a modern
Sure.
human. I'm trying to explain
Yes.
what I guess like prehistoric behaviors would have
Totally.
been, but yeah, you get the
Yeah.
point.
Hmm.
But today, our groups are no longer, now they are modern civilizations, and they're so large that we have homogenized systems to streamline them and make them more effective. And as a result, we have alienated diverse thinking and diverse behaviors, which effectively makes them maladaptive where we live today. And that's all Helen Taylor's theory of complementary cognition and how cognitively diverse groups would have increased our chances of survival. It's a really cool theory. Um, I gave an example about snap decisions, the ability to think on your feet. Today, those benefits might not always outweigh the risks. So for anyone who has a brain that adapted to work well in fast-paced, quick decision-making scenarios, your brain is probably wired to look for immediate results. And it probably didn't evolve in a setting where your goal was like a long-term objective, a 20-year plan, like getting that career. So if you are a student, or if you're like me and you're working and you're thinking, why do I have to write this paper tonight? It's due tomorrow. I cannot get myself to focus. It's probably because your evolved brain is like, that reward is 20 years out. I need something. And this is a really interesting study. People who are on, it's like the impulsivity procrastination paradox. And people who fall on that, they may be more likely to procrastinate their work because they work better in that impulsive environment and need that immediate reward, and often find themselves, when they're procrastinating a task, find themselves doing everything else that will give them an immediate reward.
Yes.
So if your brain can't
Yeah.
rationalize why the hell you're doing something, like, why am I doing my taxes? It's not going to affect me tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect me in 2 years. Like, whatever the benefit of that is just so obscure that it's not, our brains are not wired for that. So that's like another evolutionary
Totally.
mismatch.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I interviewed a psychologist on one of my first podcasts, and he had a whole like theory around that called the delayed return compensation theory, in the same kind of vein. And because he was a psychologist who was interested in anthropology, he went down that route and discovered all of this kind of stuff, and then started utilizing it in his psychological practice. And anyway, it's very
There's
interesting. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm like the biggest proponent of, we can't understand anything about ourselves unless we understand where it came from. I
Yeah.
think that the secrets, the solutions, the cures, it all lies in understanding why it cropped up to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, that's just like a long rambly list of
Yeah.
mismatches.
Yeah.
Yeah, but pretty cool. So yeah, in a nutshell, and I have like a list of evolutionary mismatches on my Substack, and also a great book that talks about the really wild ones is Survival of the Sickest by Sharon Moalem. It's old. It's like about 25 years old, but it blew my mind. I read it in
Yeah.
undergrad and it's so cool. It's
Mm.
things you would never think about being mismatched. Um, and it goes deep into our evolutionary history. But yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't heard of
yeah,
that book before. I'm gonna check it out.
yeah, it's a good
Awesome.
one.
What inspired you to start your Instagram account?
Um, so let's see. I've never told this story before, actually. This is a good one.
Nice.
Yeah. So I've had it since like 2012. And I mean I've been an anthro nerd forever. And even before, before that, I was playing around with putting things in a blog. I just read so much cool stuff. And it's
Mhm.
so meaningful to me. None of my friends and family want to hear about it anymore. So I have
Yeah,
to put it somewhere. So
right.
I started putting it online and um I would like I didn't really know what direction I wanted to go in, but I had the handle. Anyway, I didn't really do anything with it for like a decade. And then in about 2022 or 23, I read Chris Ryan's Civilized to Death,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a huge fan of his.
Hmm.
And I was so inspired, and I was like, now is the time. I'm going to start actually like getting this information out there. And I got it in my head that I wanted to write a book.
Mm.
So I wrote to Chris Ryan and
Mm.
I was like, look, I don't have a PhD. I'm just a nerd. I love this topic. I want to write a book. What advice do you have? And he wrote back and
Hmm.
he said, whatever you do, do not write a book.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
He was like, honestly, I'll be like candid with you. The odds of being successful are slim to none. It
Hmm.
is a massive process. It's a huge pain in the ass. Totally recommend you don't do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay,
Hmm.
well, so I started an Instagram page and now he follows me.
Amazing.
I
Yeah.
mean, just,
Nice.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
love his stuff.
that's like the impetus for
Yeah.
consistently posting the account. I just wanted a place where I could put all of the cool information that I've been finding,
Hmm.
mostly so it was kind of like a journal for me. Like I could just
Mm-hmm.
keep everything in there. And then other people liked it. And that's really where it started.
Awesome. Why do you feel that science education is important to introduce to social media apps? Or was it like, again, you kind of said it was just sort of like a place for you to put your your own inspiration and stuff. Did you kind of go in thinking it was going to blow up, or did you go in thinking like I'm going to be a science educator, or like what was your and why is it important now if it is at all for you, if that's part of your inspiration?
Yeah. Let's see. My career is in science.
Mm,
I'm a research professional and I work with scientists. And so day in, day out, I'm like intimately familiar with the
mm,
scientific process and with the importance of citations and peer-reviewed citations. And it's just been drilled into me over the last like 13, 14 years. And I really value it. I understand how these processes work in the sciences, in academia. I respect it. Um, and all of the scientists I work with are incredible people. They're like really down to earth. They're brilliant. They're wonderful educators. So it's been a really inspiring career for me. And I wanted to take what I learned there and make sure I
mm,
applied it to kind of all areas of my
mm,
life, but
mhm,
especially if I'm putting information online. I like to be clear that this is not my idea. This is an idea of an expert. I think it's really cool and I want you to understand it because otherwise it will stay buried in a
mhm.
journal and you will never
Right.
see it.
Mm,
And
yep,
it will
totally.
stay in its niche little
Hmm.
field and nobody will ever know about it. But it is
Hmm.
freaking awesome. So I try to kind of convey that through the account. And I really do have a lot of like unbridled nerdiness for it. And I'm not ashamed.
Yeah,
So like
you shouldn't be. Yeah.
yeah, I am who I am, and hopefully that comes across a little bit.
What are some of the key mismatches you feel most passionate about educating people in, and why?
Not like a specific mismatch, but a phrase I repeat often um, is that you're not broken.
Mm,
Uh,
hmm.
we didn't evolve for the world that we live in today. And I think almost everybody has at least one thing about themselves or about their life that they feel like, why can't I get this right? What is wrong
Hmm.
with me?
Hmm.
Why am I different? Why is
Hmm.
this so hard for me? Why does my brain work like this? I mean, I've experienced it a million times. I was like a horrible learner. I've been transparent on my account about, working with my mental health and trying to understand it and dealing with things like anxiety. And you will be led to be ashamed of these things.
Totally. Yeah.
But anyone who is living in a modern, industrialized Western country today is not alone in that. We are all grappling with uh, prehistoric bodies who are completely misaligned with our environments that are continually rapidly changing and progressing through technology. And we're losing touch with the natural world that our bodies expect. And so I don't know if it's something that can be fixed. That's not like that's way above my pay grade, but I
Yeah.
just like to point it out
Hmm.
and give people the peace of mind and comfort that you're not broken. Civilization is brand new. This is a new experiment and we've been thrown into it, and just like give yourself some grace.
Hmm. Yeah. I similarly, I just have suffered with or struggled with, mental health problems most of my life. And uh, I'm also transparent, even though I do a lot of anthropology and I call myself an anthropologist, I'm a high school dropout. I could not function in normal school. And so I had to unschool myself and become an autodidact. So most of what I know is, self-taught or collaborated with other people who can function psychologically within academia. So I partner a lot with anthropologists that are in that world. And maybe someday they'll give me an honorary degree, some
Yeah.
university, and I'll be able to graciously decline. But no, I'm just kidding.
And
um,
I'm the type of person, it sounds like you kind of are also. If I could be a permanent lifelong student and just like get
yeah,
every degree, I would do it. If
yeah,
I didn't, if
yeah.
I didn't have bills to pay, I would just be
Hmm.
a forever
Hmm.
student.
Yes.
Just that like desire to learn. And there are so many, like you said, there's so many different ways to learn. I was not a good student. I always wondered like, why is this so hard for me? I
Hmm.
know I'm not dumb.
Hmm. Right.
but
Exactly.
like by the metrics I'm being graded on, like I am. So it's a really conflicting feeling.
Hmm.
Um, and then understanding that like neurodiversity is there for a reason. And this was a topic that I think helped a lot of people. And again, it's Helen Taylor's work, the theory of complementary cognition, knowing that we evolved to be in neurodiverse environments with all different types of thinkers, and each one played an important role and was highly valued for what it contributed. And that could help us understand why a lot of the cognitive differences have stayed in the gene pool over hundreds
Hmm.
of thousands of years
Hmm.
because they were beneficial. And even
Exactly.
though today everything's homogenized, we're all supposed to think the
Hmm.
same and act the
Hmm.
same, and we dress the same, and that's not for everybody, and that's okay. So I think as long as you're providing value, um, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Are there any uh like changes you've made in your life based on some of the like ancestral habit stuff that you've.
Hmm. Let's see. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I think every time I learn something through an article I read or when I put a post together, I temporarily like adopt that in my head and make it my whole
Yes, right.
identity.
Totally.
Um, yeah. But the most long-standing, I guess, that when I started getting really into the understanding of being mismatched to our current environment was trying to spend more time outside.
Hmm.
And I've got two little kids, and that was like a huge push when they were younger to keep them outside as much as
Hmm.
possible. And learning things like being exposed to sunlight at a young age literally changes the shape of your eyeball. Like,
I
so
did not know that. That's crazy.
absorbing these
In what
facts,
way?
I know,
Yeah.
isn't that wild? So if in eyes that aren't exposed to enough sunlight when they're younger, it can it gives you like your eyeballs are supposed to be round. It makes them more oblong if you're
Interesting.
not exposed to it, and that can affect your vision, and it increases the rates of myopia.
Interesting.
And
Huh.
I mean, myopia is an epidemic now. I think they
Hmm.
expect like 50% of the population or something to be myopic in the next 20 years. Um, and one thing that can prevent it is being exposed to natural light during those early developmental years. And also, not being up close with screens all day, but it's not just screens. We are in rooms
Hmm.
that are like 12 feet walls.
Hmm.
Like we're not,
Hmm.
our eyes want to see like
Hmm.
hundreds.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we only let them like there's our views are like
Hmm.
truncated, they're limited. So that's another really cool study about myopia. But yeah, being exposed to sunlight can literally affect the shape of your eyeballs. So when you read stuff like that, you're like, I think I'm gonna have lunch outside. It just
Right.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
changes your
Exactly.
perspective.
Yeah.
So little things
Yeah.
here and there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one time I read a thing that like mattresses weren't great for the body or something. So I just slept on the floor for like a
Yeah.
year or
Been
something, or
there.
like when I was
Yes.
16, or not 16, I guess I was like 17, 18 at this point, but I read that, shoes were bad for you. So I went barefoot for a whole year, like stuff like that, where I just, yeah, I feel like maybe we have a similar,
Learn by
personality.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, learn by doing. Absolutely. That's totally who I am. And I've had
Mhm.
all of those phases. I've done like the barefoot shoe, I've done
Yeah.
the no shoe, I've done the sleeping on a cotton
Mhm.
mattress on the floor.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was funny because this last summer, I worked at a survival school in Utah for most of the time out there. I was sleeping on a pine needle, just a bed of pine needles. And I
Hmm.
was like, as I was getting ready to come home, I was like, maybe I should just like when I get home, like gather a bunch of pine needles and like put them in my backyard and I could just keep sleeping outside on pine needles.
Totally rational. Yeah.
And of course, as soon as I got home, I laid down on my mattress and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the pine needle
Yeah.
thing.
I
I'm
know.
just
We
like, this is
really,
like
it's so,
crack.
I think it's
Yeah.
important to
Yeah.
experience that, right? Because like we don't
Mhm.
realize how good we have it. And it's
Totally.
so, I try to be
Yes.
so careful on my account to not
Yes.
romanticize the past because like we
Sure.
really want our beds.
Sure.
We want our
Yeah.
air conditioning. We're really lucky to have it and we're not built to survive in the evolved environment 24/7 for our whole lives. So, yeah, so like experiencing that firsthand
Hmm.
is a good way to be like, you know what?
Hmm.
How can we actually how can we stay where we are but incorporate like
I
reasonable elements?
and I feel like it adds a level of gratitude, and appreciation for the things that you have in that regard. But I also think there is a level of like, I don't need this mattress, like
Yeah.
after being on pine needles for a summer, I'm like, and every time I go to bed now, I kind of lay down and I go, this is really comfortable, but like, do I truly need this? And part
Yeah.
of I think in rewilding, there's a concept of like how much consumption is too much, and I think a lot of people believe that civilization in this sense and in the rewilding context was a huge mistake.
Mhm.
And so there is sort of this like level of like, can we transform our contemporary society back to or to something else that is more aligned with our evolutionary inclinations? And I don't know, I mean, that's sort of what people experiment with in rewilding to varying degrees. And this actually comes up with another question I have, which is, has any of your positions, like politically or anything, have you felt them become more radical in this exploration? Because there are things like, you learn about that for the majority of our time, we were egalitarians and all civilizations are like hierarchical and have had slaves and, patriarchy and these things like that. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Rewilding Podcast. I wanted to pause and make a request for your support. This podcast is made possible by donations on Patreon. With so much media filled with misinformation and outright lies these days, I need your support to continue bringing you thoughtful, hopeful discourse on human resilience. Please become a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/Peter Michael Bauer. Thank you for keeping my project going. The world needs this. So for me, I think one of the reasons I became pretty radical with or what people would perceive of radical. I don't consider myself radical at all. I consider myself just a person trying to exist within the context of human evolution. But it appears radical because things like, my depression and the things that I have had to live with within a mismatched society that have been projected onto me as negative. For instance, in school, getting bad grades, being told I was stupid, just all the kinds of things that are thrown at you when you don't fit the like cookie cutter system that's been created that doesn't match the diversity of human evolution. For me, it radicalized me to the point where I was like, it is not my fault. It is this system, and I need to change this system. But then when you get into that, you're considered a radical because the system has its own agenda in and of itself. And so, not everybody gets political or radical to varying degrees. But I'm curious, like, if there's any particular aspect of the mismatch that's heightened your awareness or inspired you or impassioned you to get actively involved in transforming society in any particular way.
Okay, for me, the biggest strength that I have, I think, is knowledge. Knowledge is absolutely power. And like you said, the awareness, being aware of why we feel at odds with these hierarchies, with the way systems work. I don't know how to fix it. That's not my job. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not an economist. I'm not a historian. I cannot pretend to have any viable ideas whatsoever. But what I can do is figure out everything I possibly can about where our bodies and minds and nervous systems evolved and what those structures looked like. And, you know, I'm going back to the beginning of our discussion. I opened that textbook and it was like a big blank slate. Like we were around for 250,000 years. Okay, so now finally there is technology that is giving us more insights into these groups. We have more clear-cut archaeological findings that show us group sizes. We have genetics that show, again, group sizes, how many groups were in a given area, like how our ancestors were relating to one another. We can follow gene flow to see where groups went. So everything is pointing to we existed in small groups. And why scientists believe they were egalitarian is because, I mean, there's several factors. A lot of it is the way that our brains work, the way that the certain hormones that our neuroendocrine system produces in different ways than other animals. Primatology, comparing to other primates and other animals in general. So gathering all of these facts and these theories and all of the evidence and understanding where we came from, to me, primes me and strengthens my understanding of where we are today. And I don't think I can call anything about our modern systems wrong or bad or backwards without knowing what we survived in, like, well, and thrived in for so long. So I guess the answer to that question is my strategy for combating the issues of the world today is wrapping my head around where we came from. And I never think that we should go back. There's no going back in time. But maybe we can take small, reasonable pieces of our prehistoric past, the parts that work, and integrate them into our modern worlds today. And one example of that, like I don't feel, maybe I'm jaded, I don't feel like I can change what civilization looks like today. But I can integrate an egalitarian network in my small community, in my family. I can give my kids autonomy like we believe prehistoric kids had. I can make sure that their differences, their cognitive differences, are respected and used to benefit our little family. So there are ways to do this that I think on a microscopic level can enhance our quality of life and maybe push the needle a little bit to make it a world that is better for more people.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like there's a similarity in I don't know if you've ever read Daniel Quinn's work, but he was sort of the
Ishmael, yeah.
foundational, when I was 16, I read Ishmael and ran away from home to learn survival and whatever.
Yeah,
But
it'll do
one of
that
the
to you.
things that Daniel Quinn always said,
I said it'll do that to you.
yeah.
That's yeah.
One of the things that he always said that was both sort of maddening and also something I deeply appreciate about him was he was like, I'm not saying stop living this way or whatever, He's like, I'm just like the Surgeon General. I'm just saying smoking causes cancer. I'm not saying stop smoking or whatever. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you this is why. And I feel like that's a really good way to approach the information from a way that makes it accessible and reachable to a wider audience. Um, I'm definitely somebody who's like, stop fucking smoking.
Yeah.
I think that's more along the lines of how I navigate. But I also think it's like we need all of these different types of people that are educating in different ways. And I don't have any one particular solution. It is one thing that I'll like stick to with in a similar vein where I'm like, I don't want to give people a specific prescription because I think that's leads to like one way thinking and sort of cultish type stuff. But I feel like there are principles in general of, that people can focus on in regards to rewilding that focus on the mismatch and things that people can do or like modify within their own um, life, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
I think, I mean, like what you said about giving a prescription, I think people don't like to be told what to do. And that's probably like deeply rooted in us. We want autonomy. We like, even though we're really collaborative and cooperative, we do like a part of us craves that people don't like to be told what to do. I
Totally.
have this
Yeah.
theory that everybody wants the same things.
Hmm.
But we come from different backgrounds, different experiences, and we get manipulated by the world around us, and we all seek those things in different ways. So I think we all want to be safe. We all want to feel free, but that means different things to all of us. So I like to hear people out,
Hmm.
and then try to remind everybody that like we all want the same things. That's like really the point of my account, is that we are way more similar than we are different.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if I can just, you know, wake us all up to that, if I can, even if just one person realizes, okay, there's more common ground here than I initially thought. To me, I think that's progress.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So that actually makes me think of another question, which is like, what are the challenges that you face in your social media presence? Like, I think it was yesterday, you posted a thing that was like, oh, I posted a bit about conspiracy theory and evolution, and like a bunch of people must have been messaging you because you weren't like apologizing. It wasn't like some sort of official, like you were being canceled letter, but it was a very much along the lines of like, hey, I said a thing that like got some people riled up. Like, that wasn't my intention. What are your thoughts on it? What are like the challenges that you face in that platform?
I mean, it's social media, and it's like really hard. It's a great exercise. It's really hard to communicate complex topics, especially like polarizing topics, in
Mhm,
a non-polemic way.
mhm,
I do not like to be contrarian. I do not like to rile people up. I'm trying to bring people together. I don't like to encourage divisiveness. So I made a post yesterday. I genuinely had just good intentions. I hopefully clarified it in the comments, but it's going to happen. Things are going to get misconstrued.
mhm,
And I kind of welcome it as an
mhm,
opportunity for me to do better, for me to um, learn how to communicate more effectively. And also to hear what people are thinking. Why did this trigger them? What can I do differently? What am I overlooking? I'm also
mhm,
just one person. And I say this a lot to every single follower. Like, we're in this together. I'm learning this and posting it. What do you know that I left
mhm,
out that you could include here? And we could all learn from each other. So I very much want to make it an involved, engaged experience. Like, I am not an expert. I am not an expert in anything. I'm just posting cool stuff. And if you know more than I do about it, please let me know. Or if
mhm,
you think I've said this the wrong way, yes, let's do it. Let's dive into it. There was a post a while ago about uh, how estrogen evolved, no, testosterone evolved from estrogen, and
mhm.
it ruffled some feathers. So I had it, like, adapted it almost word for word from an article on Discovery. And the title was from Discovery, and the whole post was essentially quotes about it. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. Little did I know Discovery was being a little clickbaity.
Mm.
Um, and I put it out there saying, like, I'm not what is it even, microbiology? Like, I'm not a evolutionary biologist. I don't really know the ins and outs of how these hormones evolved, but this is a very thought provoking.
Mhm,
And I had some people just jump all over me, but I'm here for it.
mhm,
And I like tagged their comments so you could see them first, because I think it's
mhm,
important. It's okay to be wrong,
mhm,
but I think you need to like allow that. You
mhm,
can be wrong.
mhm.
And so I kept it because it's an important learning point and teaching point for me and for everybody on how to really critically read what's on the internet, and how to like humble yourself
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have to be perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then, sorry, another example, this is a really good one, is there's a post about a flute that was found in Demansy Cave in Georgia. And when the anthropologists found it, they said, it was the first flute. It's like made out of bone, right? Neanderthal flute. Everyone's very excited about it. Probably a few years later, someone else wrote an opposing article and said, no, it's not a flute. It's like a wolf bite on a bone, and they were found all over the cave. 100% not a flute. I read that dissenting article. They really did not want it to be a flute. I mean, they went like all in.
I sent you the article.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Read it. Thank you.
Yeah,
So I read it in
yeah.
full and I was like, shoot, like, does this mean that that wasn't true? Okay. So then I go
Mhm.
back and I read the original archaeologist would not retract it. They're like, actually, it is a flute.
Oh.
And here's why. And they go down this rabbit hole of like, it was found in a different area. Like it had like human teeth marks or like Neanderthal teeth.
Mhm, mhm.
Anyway, so they're going back and forth. And this is like the beauty of science.
Yeah.
This is the spirit of
Yeah.
science that
Yeah.
like we don't know
Mhm.
everything. We
Mhm.
don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And it's okay to debate. So I again highlighted that. I said, hey, there's been
Mhm.
an update here.
Mhm.
This it's hotly debated, it's contentious, it might not be a flute, it might be. What do you think? You read it.
Yeah.
Let's come at this from all
Yeah.
angles. And that's like the only way that science can progress is with diversity of thought, a lot of minds, a lot of experiences, a lot of backgrounds. Um, so yeah, social
Yeah.
media is an interesting place, but I try to
Yeah.
keep it friendly.
Yeah. I have it's funny. Yeah. I saw the flute thing on your thing and I sent the article in the
You
comments because, I had that whole argument with a friend of mine who then sent me that article and then I read it and I was like, wow, this is like so thorough. Like
so
they
thorough.
really like went into it and the visual aids from that article are like
Yeah,
really good and everything was so well done. But yeah, I love that like back and forth of just like people trying to figure out, and even at like the end of the day, even if it wasn't made by humans, it could have been played by humans. There's just like so much that goes
totally.
into it that we just will never know, you know?
And the best chance we have of actually knowing is by inviting more people
Hmm.
into that debate.
Totally.
Okay,
Yeah.
here's another example. Sorry, I'm so excited about this.
Yeah.
This is really fascinating. Okay, so there's an archaeological finding from 200,000 years ago in a cave, and it's what looks like the remains of straw pine needles
Mm.
in like a rectangle shape. And so the archaeologists are like, it's a bed, and on it is there's like remains of camphor leaves, and the archaeologists
Oh
were like,
yeah, yeah.
we believe that they use this as like a natural pesticide to keep creepy crawlies out. We also believe that they routinely burned the beds so that the layers of ash,
Mm.
they can kill bugs basically. If
Mm.
like
Mm. Mm.
and their
Mhm.
exoskeletons can't take it, if they inhale it, it kills them. So it was like the first evidence of a bed and the first evidence of intentional use of plants as pest control. So cool. And they said that they would routinely burn the beds, both so that they had ash and also for hygiene purposes. Okay, so this is like such a cool finding stuck in my head. Years later, I am trying to learn about postpartum practices around the world. And there's one culture in Asia called the Hmong culture. And today, they don't have access to the modern Western healthcare. At least this article says that they don't. And one of the strategies that they use postpartum is the moms who are, their bodies are still cleansing themselves, they're still bleeding. They sit on straw or hay, and every other day or every day, they move to a new bed, and that one is burned, and then
Mhm.
more is replaced on top of it. And when I read this, I was like, wait a second. First of all, it's a brilliant use of controlled fire for hygiene. Is there a chance that that 200,000-year-old bed was actually for a postpartum mom
Mm. Mm.
who is
Mhm.
sitting on it, and they were using the same technology, which is very smart and very effective, that they still use in some parts of the world today? Now, that's an example. That original archaeological team, I don't know how many moms were on it. I don't
Hmm.
know how many
Right.
people who've experienced childbirth were on it. I don't know how many people from the Hmong culture were on that team, but
Hmm.
chances are it was not a super globally diverse group. And so they're limited in their scope of knowledge. But knowing that, and had there been like a member of a more of a another group who has experience before, they could have added that to the paper. And
Hmm.
what a cool freaking twist.
Hmm.
Like what a really neat
Hmm.
and impactful hypothesis. So just it just shows why diversity is so
Hmm.
important in science. And I really take that mentality and apply it to my account. If you want to call me out on something, if you want to add your perspective, all I see is more value and
Hmm.
more potential to getting to the actual root of what we're
Hmm.
looking for.
Yeah, totally. I also feel like there's a way of engaging that is going to make me respond more positively to people as well. I feel like sometimes people, the way that they interact with me, I'll just immediately feel my anger like getting spiked and I'll respond like flippantly or something, I'm
Yeah.
trying to get like better at that in terms of my online engagement. And I commend you for your ability to. The way that you do it is just very graceful, and and it's true. You do just incorporate everything. Even the trolls are
Well,
not getting their feet that what they're looking for, I think,
trolls are people too. No, I'm kidding. Um, so one thing I have learned, and it was hard initially to kind of wrap my head around this, but if something triggers me, it means there's a grain of truth behind it.
Mm,
And so for me, whether it's they're saying something true or not, there's something there that has accuracy in it. And I try to be open to it. And whether it's triggering something from my personal life, it's triggering something that like maybe I haven't researched deeply enough. But I try to remember that my triggers are my triggers. So because there are people who they might say things that would trigger you, but for me, I'm
totally.
like, no, it doesn't bother me at
Yes.
all.
Yes.
So if I sit with it and unpack it, then I get, I don't know, it calms me down and I
Mm-hmm.
can address it from a more rational, calm
Hmm.
perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely I feel the way to navigate the internet at this point because also you just don't even know if they're like spam bots that are
Oh,
intentionally trying to create
yeah,
chaos or whatever, right? Like something like I don't know. Anyway, there's just lots of those these days, so who knows?
absolutely. No, it's true. And yeah, sometimes I feel like I know what you're trying to do here.
Hmm.
I mean, fortunately, I knock on wood, I don't get a lot of that.
Hmm.
Like when I write my post, I try to anticipate anything. And like I said, I avoid being polemic. I avoid
Hmm.
being um the whole thing is that I want to bring us together.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, you do a really good job of
thanks. I
that.
appreciate it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Um, yeah, what's your ideal outcome for people who follow and learn from your posts?
Um, okay, it's three things. So first, again, like coming full circle again, I want people to know who their prehistoric ancestors are. I feel like it's a little unfair that we so much of the history book, well, I get it, it's based around when written history cropped up. But that's not everybody. And they're, you know, our prehistoric ancestors lived such dynamic lives and did so much with nothing. If you send me into the woods with no tools, I'm gone. Forget it. I mean, they built societies, they built tools, they distilled poisons, they found food for themselves. They did things that, I mean, most of us could never even think of today. And we've lost that knowledge. But I think in some way, it's like a reverence, honoring the people who came before us who are just shrouded in mystery and misunderstood. So that's the first thing I hope people, and that's why it's called Ancestral Habits, because I wanted to take small things that we know people have always done, even as like insignificant as we know they breathed air. So we know that they
Yeah.
knew the feeling of
Mhm.
cold air coming into their mouth. And if I do it right now, it's cool to me, maybe I'm weird, to think that 200,000 years ago, another person maybe another girl, another female who is around my age did that too and felt the same thing. And that weird connection just brings me so much comfort.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the first thing is being able to connect with our prehistoric past. Um, Also to understand ourselves better, whether it's feeling better about yourself in a world that tells you that like being different is bad, or that it's not bad, but it's way harder to be
Mhm.
different. Um, I hope that people find a sense of comfort learning where their differences come from and that they were at one point a strength.
Mhm.
Um, just remembering that hopefully, it's never going to make life easier, but it maybe brings peace of mind. And then the third goal is always for us to connect with each other because we come from the same shared prehistoric past. These are our common ancestors, and that is such a cool thing. And especially today when they're like everything is dividing us, remembering that no matter what, no matter where you are on this planet, any human who's alive today, we probably have more things in common than we know. Our culturally, we are very, very different. But the way that we use that culture is markedly similar. And there is a lot of beauty in that, I think.
Mhm.
Um, it's grounding
Mhm.
that we're all humans. We all come from the same place. We have the same ancestors who had the same experiences. And as far as we feel from it today, like that, we can never escape that. And our evolved past will always kind of connect us.
Mhm. Is there anything else you'd like to say as we wrap things up?
Do
What
you have
here's
questions?
um I have one more question, which is like, what is a book you read recently or a reading that you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome, and that you would recommend?
My God, I wish I had more time to read. I'm like looking at my nightstand.
Mm,
I read so many articles. I don't have
mm-hmm.
a ton of time for
An
books.
article is fine as well. Yeah.
Well, like it's my last post, whatever that was. Um, I think the last full book I read was Invisible Rivals by Jonathan Goodman.
Oh,
It's
okay.
really
Mm,
timely. I
mm,
absolutely recommend that book. It
mm,
talks about did prehistoric humans lie, cheat, and steal like we do today? And it's almost we don't want our brains don't want to allow such nefarious behavior to be applied to like what's such an idyllic time. But his overarching theory is, of course, we are
right.
still those same humans. The difference
Yeah.
is that we lived in small groups that were a cap on certain behaviors. They didn't
Mhm,
allow for cheaters and liars and manipulators to excel, to
mhm,
thrive.
mhm,
They were systemically kind of held back or ostracized or chastised. Whereas today, our systems actually reward that
mhm,
behavior.
mhm.
So the whole book goes into, I mean, it's fascinating. I did an interview with him. I have some of his responses on my Substack, and a few posts on his topic. So that's a great book.
Awesome. What's the
Really, yeah.
title again?
Invisible Rivals by
Mhm.
Jonathan R. Goodman.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the
Thank
Rewilding
you.
podcast.
Really
And
appreciate it. This was fun.
where can people find your work?
So I'm on Instagram at Ancestral Habits. And then if you are trying to get away from social media, like we all are, I have a free Substack newsletter that takes everything that went on Instagram over the past 2 weeks, puts it in one newsletter so you can kind of skip the scroll or like the doom scrolling and just have one email sent to your inbox.
Awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Rewilding Podcast. Check out the show notes to connect with my guest and for a list of the resources that we mentioned in our conversation. If this episode inspired you, made you think more deeply, or gave you some new tools to use, make sure to subscribe and become a patron at patreon.com/Peter Michael Bauer. If you're new to rewilding or want to expand your perception of it, I recommend attending one of my Rewilding 101 workshops, which I offer both in person in Portland, Oregon, and online for those who live around the world via Zoom. You can check upcoming dates and register at rewildportland.com. Thanks for listening.